Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Director General THSI, our distinguished guest, Member of House of Lords, Lord Qurban, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Indian government is engaged in systematic extermination of a nation, while the international community is watching with criminal silence. Today's date marks opening of yet another dark chapter in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir's history, when 2 years ago, India unilaterally and in violation of UN Security Council resolutions changed the status of the disputed state of Jammu and Kashmir. Ever since, Kashmiris have remained under a military siege. These years mark brutalizing of defenseless Kashmiri Muslim youth in particular, sexual harassment of women, and destruction of Kashmiris' properties on the pretext of cordon and search operations. Condemnable change in demography has not only picked up pace, but it has also been more firmly institutionalized. Illegal detentions, extrajudicial and custodial killings, enforced disappearances, killings in fake and staged encounters, denial of religious freedom, denial of access to basic amenities of life, including medical facilities, education, business, and curbs on freedom of speech, intimidation of NGOs and INGOs, complete blackout of communication, and denial of access to media to report on the ground situation also ensued as a matter of routine ever since. Ladies and gentlemen, all the acts of crimes against humanity and the threats to right to life that I have mentioned are backed by authentic reports issued by UN Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Special Rapporteurs on torture, inhuman treatment, extrajudicial and arbitrary executions, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Jammu and Kashmir Council for Human Rights, Jammu and Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society, International People's Tribunal, Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons, and numerous other reports. Given the time constraint, I have prepared a list of links of a number of reports on which my assertions about crimes against humanity committed by the Indian occupation forces are based. These reports very clearly reflect on the perilous state of human security in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the theme topic of today's event. But the plight of Kashmiri Muslims is not just 2 years old. It spans over 7 decades, dotted with tens of thousands of heart-rending stories. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today's Kashmir tragedy is the result of conspiracy and connivance between the Viceroy Lord Mountbatten, Chairman Boundary Commission Sir Cyril Ratcliffe, and Congress leaders Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. In violation of agreed principles about the demarcation of boundaries in Punjab, Gurdaspur, a Muslim-majority district and geographically contiguous on all sides to what constituted Pakistan, was dishonestly and deceitfully awarded to India. The purpose was to provide India with physical access to the princely state. It was not announced until a day after the independence of the two dominions. My statement is based on historical documents, such as Viceroy Lord Mountbatten's 17th and last personal report contained in Volume 12 of Transfer of Power 1942-1947, as you can see on this slide. The illustrations at the beginning of the book, entitled Kashmir, A Disputed Legacy by British historian Sir Alistair Lamb, are revealing as reflected here on the slides which you will see on the screen. Memoirs of Sir Christopher Beaumont, Secretary to Boundary Commission, carried in a BBC report, is perhaps the most authentic testimony of the dishonesty. The Indian author and lawyer A.G. Noorani has also clearly reflected in his book, Destruction of Hyderabad, as you can see on the slide here. You need to actually have a close look and read these documents which I have actually displayed just for a while on the screen. These are available with the institute here. All these references of dishonesty and deceit are part of documented accounts of partition of the subcontinent. Distinguished guests, Congress leadership's commitment to accept Mountbatten as the first Governor General of Hindustan Dominion makes it a typical case of conflict of interest, since Mountbatten was to supervise the partition plan, being the British Empire's representative as a viceroy. Moreover, Justice Meherchand Mahajan, Congress nominated member of Punjab Boundary Commission, to become the first Prime Minister of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir on 15th October 1947 is quite intriguing, isn't it? Copy of the Independence Act 1947, which was discussed thrice at the British Parliament and passed on 18 July 1947, included Gurdaspur district as part of Pakistan in the second schedule of the Act. It's here on the screen, you can see that. The distinguished audience will agree that to resolve any dispute, it is an imperative to know its genesis, the very reason why I have brought up these references. Copies of the references are available, as I said, with the institution here. These historical accounts may help trace the roots of today's Kashmir dispute and the injustice done to the Kashmiris and also Pakistan. The dishonesty had cost 1 million lives then, as rightly asserted by Sir Christopher Beaumont in his memoirs, and it continues to take toll on innocent Kashmiris' lives through all these 7 decades. All the facts and figures of human casualties are documented, as you can see on the screen here. I have refrained from trading the lines to underline the political and strategic reasons linked to the creation of Kashmir dispute by design, lest the detractors bring in the element of conspiracy theory. Nevertheless, Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan had underscored this angle, as you may have noted on the very first slide, which talked about Mountbatten's account. If you happen to read the referred material, please note that Lord Mountbatten's claim in his documented account that he wanted to remain neutral is falsified by all other accounts that I have referred to herein. Ladies and gentlemen, the August gathering is well aware that Kashmir is an internationally recognized dispute, sitting on the UN Security Council agenda with unimplemented resolutions for the last 7 decades now. The Resolution 47 of 21st April 1948 calls for the Kashmiris' right to self-determination under a UN-supervised plebiscite. Kashmir dispute, since day one, had its political and security dimensions. In 1998, it was dubbed as the nuclear flashpoint in South Asia. The region hosts the world's highest concentration of people in abject poverty. Its socio-economic development has remained hostage to the Kashmir dispute, which is the main bone of contention between India and Pakistan and the sole reason of the wars fought between the two countries, and Indian animosity that Pakistan constantly faces in different manifestations. But my thrust of today's talk is on human security in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Due to the failure of the United Nations, UN Security Council, major powers, and the so-called champions and defenders of peace and security to resolve the dispute, human rights has been regrettably added to the Kashmir dispute as yet another dimension, the most gruesome one and a matter of profound concern. In terms of Article 34 of the UN Charter, the United Nations is responsible for addressing the threats to the regional peace and security. Apparently, either the UN is oblivious of its obligation or tends to look the other way. Unfortunately, despite availability of abundant, irrefutable evidence and authentic documented accounts of crimes against humanity and the war crimes committed by the Indian government and its occupation forces in Jammu and Kashmir, the international community lacked courage or showed double standards, that it has not called India to account and ensured delivery of justice to the Kashmiri nation. particularly the Kashmiri Muslims who are being systematically exterminated. May I request you people at the back to talk, but please do not talk so loudly to interrupt the deliberation here. Ladies and gentlemen, the genocide of October-November 1947 in Jammu, observed every year on 6th November by the Kashmiris as Yom Shohada Jammu, was the first calculated step towards changing the demography of the disputed princely state. Many speakers before me have talked about and pointed to this very important aspect. 500,000 Kashmiri Muslims were eliminated by Dogra forces, joined by Indian occupation forces and RSS terrorists. 1 million indigenous residents were forced to leave, thereby permanently altering the demography of Jammu, rendering it a Muslim minority state from a Muslim majority territory. The sponsor of genocide, India, remains unpunished till to date, while we have before us the Nuremberg trials and many other examples to wonder why the UN Security Council and major powers should cherry pick the issues. Since 1989, around 24 massacres have been committed. A large number of Kashmiri Muslims have been forced to leave Indian occupied Kashmir over 7 decades, who have taken refuge in AJK, Pakistan and elsewhere. Distinguished audience, genocide, massacres, extrajudicial and arbitrary killings, forced disappearances, forced expulsions and illegal settlement of non-Kashmiris are all tools of changing the demography to convert Jammu and Kashmir into a Muslim minority state, which India has been doing since 1947 with impunity. According to the 1941 Jammu and Kashmir census, the Muslim population of the princely state was then 77.1%, as you can see on the slide. In 1947, prior to the partition, the documented accounts indicate Muslim majority was around 79%. After August 1947, under the Indian illegal occupation, the Muslim population of Jammu and Kashmir has been reduced to only 68% according to the 2011 census. Next census would be manipulated by India and thus questionable. India has proved to be untrustworthy, and the international community has to look into this very closely. India is a blatant violator of international humanitarian and human rights frameworks. Indian state-sponsored actions and terrorist organization RSS are responsible for the genocide, massacres and forced expulsions of the indigenous Kashmiri Muslims and illegal settlement of India's own citizens systematically in Jammu and Kashmir. These acts by an occupier to change the demography fall under crimes against humanity and war crimes as defined by Para 6, Article 49 of 1949 Geneva Convention 4. Article 85, 4A of 1977 Additional Protocol 1 of Geneva Convention 4. Article 7, Para 2, Subclause D and Article 82B8 of 1998 ICC Statute. Article 22, 2B and Article 20C1 of 1991 and 1996 International Law Commission's Draft Code of Crimes Against Peace and Security of Mankind. Honorable envoys and notables, by virtue of the definitions under the mentioned articles of Geneva Convention, ICC and ILC, India is liable to be punished for the acts of crimes against humanity and war crimes committed by her as an occupier as provided in Article 7 of ICC. India is also in breach of Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide 1948, Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women 1979, Convention on Rights of Child 1989, and International Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Under Article 6 of the UN Charter, a UN member which has persistently violated the principles may be expelled from the organization by the General Assembly on the recommendations of the Security Council. Unfortunately, some of the permanent members of Security Council are supportive of Indian aspiration to become a permanent member of the Security Council. There can't be anything more ironic and bigger mockery of the organization's charter. As per the OIC Charter, preserving dignity, cultural and religious identity of Muslim communities outside the member states is also OIC members' obligation to act resolutely against the exterminators of Kashmiri Muslims. I'll conclude by saying that the named international organizations and international community should realize their responsibility before they lose their credibility and people's trust. Kashmiris are still hoping that the UN, OIC and international community will stand up for the delivery of justice to them.